we didn't cover this with the level of specificity I think that a lot of people did in the run-up, because, I mean, you're talking about 445 voters, 447 voters, I guess, of Democratic Party operatives, more or less. Some who are now lobbyists and former electeds. And obviously we talked about Tom Perez's entrance into the race, which was largely a push rather than a sort of a jump into the race from the Obama administration. Clearly they wanted their guy in there. Now, when you talk about the politics, the political differences between Perez and Ellison, you're not necessarily talking about a wide gulf on policies that they have taken positions on, to the extent that they would take public positions on the same things. Perez obviously was a supporter of the TPP. One could argue, I guess, that, you know, he was so because he was part of the Obama administration. But putting aside the differences in the politics and the individuals, Perez had not a significant amount of electoral experience. I think he had run for local office in Maryland at one point. And I don't know how much administrative experience Ellison has, and it's a largely administrative position. All of that, to me, was largely irrelevant. It is a position like this, what is important about it is access to resources. It is far less about that individual who sits atop there than the people they would hire and the wells in which they draw upon in terms of personnel. And Ellison's people would have come from a far more progressive leftist wing of the Democratic Party. I mean, I think that without a doubt, we know this just because the reporting is pretty clear, and there was certainly, like, you know, some boasting afterwards that Perez was chosen to run for the DNC chair because he was so closely aligned with the Obama people. And there's two ways you can look at this, but simultaneously. They're not mutually exclusive. One is you want someone who comes from the more progressive left part of the Democratic Party because of the personnel they're going to put in there are going to be more reflective of left-wing positions. And also, you know, I don't know if the people that Ellison would have populated the DNC with in terms of staff would be great at rebuilding the Democratic Party. But I do know that the Obama administration, regardless of what you think about their policies and what they did in office, was uniquely bad at building the Democratic Party, as measured by really the only metric that counts, and that is how many elected Democrats you have across the country. I mean, that to me seems like a particularly uncontroversial statement. So it's unfortunate in that respect. But there was a great piece by Nikki Saval, who I feel like we had on this program. I can't remember exactly in what. In N Plus Magazine, nplusmag.com, about this race. And I just want to read a couple of portions of it. I mean, I think she, assessment of the Democrats, I mean, it was an odd vote, right? I mean, I think there's reporting that suggests all the anti-Muslim smears of Ellison, which came in the form of he's anti-Semitic, seem to have had at least some traction. I don't know if that accounted for 45 votes. I wonder if people actually voted for Ellison just with the hopes of getting Alan Dershowitz out of the Democratic Party. But he writes, nothing appears to scare Democrats more than energy and debate. And I think this is true. And we've seen this for years. I mean, look, this is nothing new. During the Bush years, the same thing. You know, if there was anybody, any writer with any measure of passion, they were necessarily disregarded. If there was any, I mean, look, Howard Dean, not particularly liberal, but basically was killed off in the Democratic Party because he screamed on stage. Right? I mean, honestly, that's what sunk his candidacy. And that passion runs contrary to the sort of measured wonkiness and managerial qualities that establishment Democrats cling to. The fact that most social movements were behind Ellison was a source of genuine terror for parties still somehow convinced that if it were not for the FBI and the Russians, they would be in serene command of the nation's major institutions. Now, I think to a certain extent, it's quite possible if it were not for the FBI, that Clinton would have eked it out. I think there still would have been a problem within the Democratic Party. For the movements themselves, however, there is a strategic question. We find ourselves in that cyclical, even farcical left-wing position of confronting the Democratic Party as such. More prosaically, was it wise to invest so much psychic energy in the contest for DNC chair? I'm skipping around here a little bit. And then he points to an interview that Marshall Ganz gave at the Talking Points memo. And Ganz, who is a Harvard professor and has written and been a part of many social movements, said that the DNC is not and should not be the main avenue for the left. For one thing, the rise of conservative movement didn't happen through the RNC. And this, to me, seems self-evident, which is not to say that you should create another party. It is to say that you build power and then use it to take over the Democratic Party, because the vehicle exists there. And if you're only 45 votes away from putting Keith Ellison now, where will you be down the road? Conservatives successfully, this is according to Ganz, successfully created a more or less coherent network of organizations linked to local, state, and national politics, which is a traditional form of effective political organization in the U.S. You look in vain for something like that on the progressive side. There's such a proliferation of groups, all kinds of groups, some of which take up space without filling it. Now, there's a couple of things that you got to consider when you consider this quote. One is there was a lot of resources for the conservatives to create a coherent network, like the Koch network. I mean, they're dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into these things. You had the AFP, on the rise of the Tea Party, you had the AFP, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Koch brothers, in every single state, basically running a parallel organization to the DNC. Reince Priebus was an AFP operative. Scott Walker got a lot of his support from the AFP. There's money out there. You're actually building a professional organization. The Koch brothers reportedly have a better voter file than the RNC. You're not going to get that kind of money on the left, but you can make up for it with an enthusiasm. And, you know, when you see things like Indivisible and Our Revolution and just organic organizing that has yet to sort of get to that point where there's things are starting to get networked, it's encouraging. Now, a lot of those things aren't necessarily left politics yet. You know, a lot of them are anti-Trump. But Saval goes on to say, in other words, the outcome of the DNC contest is as much evidence of the left's institutional weakness as of the party's immovability. I don't think that can be emphasized enough. So, you know, sadly, where we're at least in terms of taking over the Democratic Party. Now, with that, let me just qualify, we are more or less where we would have been if Hillary Clinton had won the election, appointed whoever it was, I don't know, Jennifer Palmieri. I have no idea who it would have been, but God forbid. And it's just a question of building that power. Let me just qualify that statement with saying the fact that they had to put Perez out there to stop Ellison is an indication of some power, right? It wasn't Terry McAuliffe, part two, coming in there. And there's a gulf between Tom Perez and Terry McAuliffe. So, I mean, there's some movement, but Saval goes on to write, the sheer numbers in the streets and even the millions of primary votes for Sanders are not signs of achievement, but of incipience. So we're just at the beginning, folks. There are still millions more disengaged, electorally non-participating, unattached to party, most of them among the most vulnerable populations in society. This is the working class the media and political organizations should be concerned about, a group that may be more susceptible to movement building around issues like police and schools and workplaces than, for the moment anyway, questions of party. They remain a vital constituency for a left clearly finding its feet. I mean, this is going to be the challenge on the left because, you know, we just had this election that took place in Delaware, a state Senate special election. It was just 3 days ago, Saturday. The Democrat won, and incidentally, this election had the state legislatures, I think you get to 2/3, right? If Delaware had gone Republican, you get close to 2/3, which is a problem. Not just in sheer numbers, but also like literally constitutional convention type of problem. In an off-year special election, this candidate, I guess her name was Hansen, won over 1,000 more votes than the Democratic candidate garnered in the 2014 general election. So now I don't think all those people who are coming out there are like coming out because they are motivated for things like free college and whatnot necessarily. I think they're coming out there because they're anti-Republican, which is fine. Because we're going to need that too. Because again, the more Republicans win, the less empowered the left is. I know that bears repeating because some people still can't seem to get that through their head. People are tweeting at me like, see, Ellison lost. It proves that Jimmy Dore was right. What?
I've gotten a lot of those too.
It's shocking. You see, the left is not, the whole point was supposed, I'm not going to say that 2020. I'm not going to say that.
Did.
But
somebody bought the URL Stein 20 dash or hyphen 20.com and it redirects to majority.
I love it. They couldn't get the full 2020 though?
I don't know.
Then somebody else must have taken that. She's running again.
It was her husband.
Nina Turner had a good tweet. She said, never put all your faith in any one person or organization. Blind loyalty hurts your vision. Persevere, be purpose-driven, and push hard. And
sell out. Just total pawn of the establishment.
the real problem was that guy, Sam Ronan, didn't get the head of the DNC.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, I think they proved. And, you know, the amazing thing is that if Sam Ronan had been elected, then both Pence and Trump would have been removed from office within
Indeed.
6 months. But the DNC is so corrupt. They don't care. And they want war with Russia.
Hey, it's Sam Seder. Why don't you subscribe to this channel? You can do so right over here. Over. Subscribe.